is Reyes. This is Reyes, aka Reyes Poetry, with We Are Culture Creators, and today we are having a JARS Roundtable, of course supported by JARS, which you can check out all over the state. Today we have a special guest with us from Viola, one of the largest and fastest growing and really coolest brands around cannabis, and we have the CEO and founder, Al Harrington, with us today.
What's up, brother?
What up,
How you
though?
doing?
What
You
up?
good?
Everything good? Yeah, bro. Yeah.
All right.
So for us, the conversation, I think, for me, is to think about, hearing about your story and learning about it. Here in Detroit, one of the things that we're really talking about is how cannabis is being used on multiple levels, not just on the medicinal and people using it, but also in arts and culture and music and business. And so I'm curious, and I'm sure the folks that are tuning in are interested to hear about let's talk about the seeds of the story. Like where for you did this journey with Viola and cannabis start? Where are the seeds planted for you? Because I did see that at one point, like, you were really I don't know if it was opposed, but you thought cannabis was probably like the worst thing that could happen to anybody. I did see that. So tell us a little bit about the seeds.
Yeah, bro. So, my background from Orange, New Jersey. So in New Jersey, I was born in '80, so I'm an '80s baby. So obviously the war on drugs was, rampant during that time. I've seen a lot of people, lives negatively affected by cannabis. Anytime anybody had any issues, anything that was going wrong in their life, was always told to me that, drugs had something to do with it. Right. I remember even in 8th grade, in Orange Middle School, 2 of my classmates being locked up for having like nickel bags of weed in their locker when they searched our lockers one day. So I was always super afraid of cannabis. Get to high school, become an athlete, student athlete. And same thing, just being an athlete, you thinking like you don't want to smoke because you have been told all this time that cannabis was obviously very bad for you. It was a gateway drug. Mm-hmm. I remember my aunts and uncles being kicked out the house for smelling like weed. You know what I'm saying? So something I just completely stayed away from. I get to the NBA, and that's when I started to change my perception around cannabis because my rookie year, 2 of my teammates had me go, and one of them was actually from Michigan, had me go to the store and grab them some items. And when I came back, I walk into a cloud of smoke. And it was just kind of weird. And I go in and I'm realizing that they smoking. And the next day we go to practice and they dominate the practice. So I'm like, damn. So I'm like, how can they smoke weed and still be this good? You know what I'm saying? So that's when I started to realize that I might have been lied to or whatever. But it all came to head for me in 2010. When I signed a contract with the Denver Nuggets, and when I was there, I've always been a newspaper reader because as a rookie I always had to get orange juice, donuts in the newspaper. So
that's real. You had to do
that's
that.
real. That's real as a rookie thing, and it kind of stuck with me. So I'm always now grabbing the paper every morning, right. And I'm always reading the newspaper. Obviously reading the sports section, obviously, but every day I pick it up, there's something in there about cannabis, the benefits of cannabis. So my grandmother came to see me play at the end of that year, which is 2011. Now it's 2011. And when she gets there, I take her bags downstairs. She asks me to bring her bag back up. I bring it up and I sit it up on the counter. She comes upstairs, she opens it, and it's the biggest pill bag I ever seen in my life. And she starts taking all this medication, and I asked her, I'm like, Grandma, why are you taking so much medication? And she just gave me the whole list that black grandmothers kind of deal with, high blood pressure, diabetes, glaucoma. And I told her, I said, Grandma, glaucoma? I was just reading the newspaper how cannabis cured glaucoma patients. So I started telling her more, and she finally was like, well, what is cannabis? And I was like, it's marijuana, weed. She's like, reefer? She's like, boy, I ain't smoking no reefer. You out your mind. So she's like, she's laughing, and she's like, I can't believe you sit here telling me to smoke reefer. And I'm like, I'm telling you, Grandma, it's medical. I'm like, it's doctors prescribing here. She's like, no. So the next day I come home, and she was actually in pain in her eyes, and she couldn't see when I walked in. She was like squinting. So I was like, Grandma, what's up? She's like, my eyes are killing me today. I could barely see. So I was like, well, Grandma, look, you're in a state where it's legal. Let's just try cannabis, and I said it'll be our secret if it don't work. Let's just try it. So she's like, I'm in so much pain today, I'll try anything. So I called my boy, his name's Bugs, told him to go to the dispensary. He brought back Vietnam Kush. and we put in a volcano bag for her. And I'm not a smoker at this time, believe it or not. You know what I'm saying? I smoked one time in 2009 and got so paranoid, I was like, I don't understand why y'all smoke, but this is how y'all feel, you know?
I thought people were coming to arrest you.
Yeah, it was like I heard sirens. I heard all kinds. I was in Arizona. I was in Phoenix or Scottsdale. So we put in a volcano bag, take her in the garage, have her smoke it. I take her downstairs, I go take a nap. Hour and a half later, I wake up, I'm ready to jump in the shower, and I thought about my first time smoking and how I felt. So I was like, let me go check on her because she's 79 years old, right? So I go downstairs and the door's closed. So I'm not knowing what to expect. So I knock on the door. I don't hear anything, so I just open the door. And when I poke my head through the door, her back's to the door and she's looking down. So I say, Grandma, how you feeling? And literally she turns around and she's crying tears. And she says, I'm healed. She's like, I haven't been able to read the words of my Bible in over 3 years. So she was downstairs reading her Bible after she got high for the first time in her life. And, you know, obviously I go in the room, I hug her, she makes me cry, she made me cry. So now we both crying. And I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, you won't believe this. And she's telling my mother, like, everything is so bright, it's so clear, I can see again. It's like, she's like testifying to my mom. And I remember just riding to the game that day and I was just like, this is just amazing. Like, I can't believe, like, especially my grandmother, like being 79 years old, like to convince someone at that age to try cannabis after, you know, she's born in 1931. So she lived through the whole thing of like, the war on drugs and just how like cannabis had been demonized.
The propaganda that came out, I think there's a film called Reefer Madness.
Exactly.
I don't know if you ever see Reefer Madness.
Yeah, of course.
I can only imagine like what your grandmother was thinking would happen, right, if she took like the marijuana.
And I always say, like, for me, like, you know, I've always been highly favored, you know what I'm saying, and blessed for sure. And like even with basketball, like I didn't set out to be an NBA player.
I heard that you didn't really start playing basketball until about what?
Till I was a freshman for real.
Year?
I didn't take it serious till my sophomore year.
That's crazy.
And I got really good, and 3 years later, I'm in the NBA. You know what I'm saying? So even this, I feel like this was just God setting me up for my next thing. You know what I'm saying? Because, like I said, for a 79-year-old woman, after all the propaganda, to even be open-minded to even try it, and it works. You know what I'm saying? And I tell people all the time, like, my grandmother not going to heaven, we all going to hell. Like, she the most straight and narrow lady. She cooked the communion bread. She collected all the tithe and everything. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, seeing that she tried it and it helped her, it just inspired me to learn more. For like the next 3-4 months, I really just started reading different things, reading about all the benefits of cannabis, how it helps, kids with epilepsy and seizures, how it helps people with just from quality of life, people that have HIV and cancer, terminally ill, just cannabis is just really, is medicine. You know what I'm saying? And it's something that we've been lied about for a long time. And that's what inspired me just to learn more, made my first investment that next year. And, in 2013, when we got our first license, we had to name the company something, right? And, we decided to name it after the person that inspired us to get there, which was my grandmother, Viola. That's crazy. And, that's how we got the name for the brand.
That's a really, really amazing story, bro. That's crazy.
Thanks, man.
So thinking about the season, I just want to talk a little bit. So you didn't play basketball until you were a freshman. So I assume that there's some level of work ethic, right, that applies to this transformation. A lot of guys that are a lot of athletes, and again, I'm not in that world, but I have some friends that, are pro athletes, and I can kind of see from a distance as a fan, it's hard for guys to transition sometimes after they get out playing 17 years in the league and that adrenaline and that camaraderie. So I would assume, what was the work ethic that it took for you to go from like not really playing basketball as a freshman, then becoming someone that goes from high school to the league, right? I'm assuming there's some application of that on the business side for you when it comes to cannabis. I think I seen in one of your interviews, you talked about even having to learn the process from the seed up because you wanted to know. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, man, like, for me, like my dad passed when I was 8 years old. And when he died, it was weird, like how his transition, but pretty much one day he was like, come on, I want you to come with me to the store. And we went walking to the store and he was telling me that he was sick. And he was just like, he didn't know how much longer he was going to live. He didn't tell me what was wrong with him, but he was just like, I'm the oldest, so he's like, I'm gonna really need you to step up. My mom was pregnant, you know what I'm saying?
This is in New Jersey?
This is in New Jersey.
Wow.
I'm 8, and he's just like, I'm gonna need you to step up, help your mom. She's about to have, your little sister, this, that, and the third. And the next morning, he never spoke again, like for the rest of his life. Like, wow. He never said another word the rest of his life for like the next 6 months, right? So that was something that always just stuck with me. So my whole thing, like, coming up was always like, I've always been like, I got to take care of the family. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I thought I was going to play in the NFL, to be honest. Like,
what
football
position?
Was my first love. I wanted to be a defensive end.
Okay.
So that was my first love, and that was what I thought I was going to do. But it ended up transitioning to basketball. I grew. I went from 5'10" to 6'4" in one summer as a freshman, and I moved. So when I got to the new city, everybody just thought I was a basketball player. So that's how I ended up playing ball, just because I was 6'4". And to your point, like, my work ethic came during that time because you got to think about it. Going from an unranked, never played basketball to being the #1 player in the country in 3 years, you got to grind.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to bust your ass. And that's what I did. You know what I'm saying? I had a coach that just was riding me, Kevin Boyle, and my AAU coach, Sandy Payonin. Like, they put a lot into me, and I just kept receiving it, and I just kept working. And then during that process, I heard about, like, in order to be an expert in anything, you got to get your 10,000 hours in.
Yeah.
So that was something I always remembered. So when I got to the NBA, same thing. I think that, I remember coming in the locker room, and it's funny because I always say the reason why NBA athletes or just professional athletes are good in general is because we have no real concept of reality, right? We all think we Superman. No matter what happens, we think we can overcome it, right? So when I get in the locker room, I'm in there with the Reggie Millers and the Dale Davis, Antonio Davis, and Mark Jackson. And I'm really thinking I'm better than them.
You have 18, to, right? You
at 18, I'm like, why am I not playing? Like, really? You know what I'm saying? But I kept working until I started playing. But then after I got my spot, all I kept thinking about was the young Al Harrington. Right? So it's always a kid that's coming underneath me looking at me like, Al Harrington, he trash. Like, why am I playing behind Al Harrington? You know what I'm saying? So that gave me my edge, right? That made me just like always constantly try to reinvent myself, keep playing, keep working, because I always knew that it was a young Al Harrington looking at me the way I looked at them.
Yep.
So that's what allowed me, for me, to be honest, I think that's the reason why I played 16 years, because I always had that mindset. I never became comfortable. So when I got into cannabis, it was the same thing. It was like almost like going from being a freshman in high school playing basketball again. I knew nothing about weed. I didn't even smoke weed. You know what I'm saying? I actually looked down on it. You know what I'm saying? So during that time, like, and it was funny, like, with my grandmother's story, and then the next year I had a botched knee surgery, and I almost died. I got a staph infection or whatever. So that's what got me to start using cannabis at that point, because it's giving me all the opioids and different things like that.
Yeah, like that transition from, so I'm assuming, without saying names, I'm sure that just what the leagues will prescribe athletes, right? When you say opioids, it's just how destructive, right? We just look at pills, like you said, your grandmother had a bag of pills. Yeah. I'm assuming as a pro athlete, that's the first option for a lot of you.
Of course, it's the first thing, or they give you shots and stuff like that. But a lot of times that stuff doesn't work, right? All it does is mask pain or whatever, or it usually sets you up for something else to go wrong down the line. Yeah. And even like throughout most of my career, I played hurt a lot. You know what I'm saying? For 7 straight years, I took anti-inflammatories. I took Celebrex. I took 2 in the morning, 1 at night, just to be able to play. And I had one of my teammates that had suddenly passed or whatever. His name was Jason Collier. And, same thing. It's just like, it's funny just how things happen. Like a couple of days before he passed, he's telling me about, like, why you keep taking those? Why you take so many? Like, do you understand the side effects of it and all that? And I looked into the side effects, but at the time, you got to remember, like, I'm first generation money. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I got to take a chance with my life to make this money, because I'm trying to set my family up.
It's a calculated risk.
Yeah, I'm trying to set my family up for a better future. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's where, NFL guys, like, same thing. They take shots before games, because if they don't take the shots or they don't produce, they're going to be out of the league. You know what I'm saying? So you always have that pressure. And then that's my point where, like, cannabis, now that we know that cannabis is a way that we can treat a lot of these issues that athletes deal with, these leagues have to open up these opportunities for these players and give these guys alternative ways to medicate, because, not only are we in pain, but, we have mental stress, you know what I'm saying, anxiety.
The bubble showed that, just watching the footage from a distance, about, like, going through some of the guys just being away from family, being isolated. And I've heard that the NBA did allow cannabis somewhat for folks that were in the bubble. I don't know how truthful that is.
They did. No, they did. So what happened was they didn't say they didn't provide it for them,
Right.
But they didn't test for it.
Okay.
So from what I heard in the bubble was like they had a floor in the hotel.
Got it.
That if you needed to smoke, you could go up there and smoke safely without nobody like judging.
That's the difficult thing, right? So you're playing in Denver. Let's say you're playing in a space where cannabis is legal, yet the league, right, isn't transitioning or growing. And a lot of times, obviously, as organizations, especially large corporate organizations, they have a hard time catching up. So that transition of the injury, at some point, that's planting some seeds for you on the business side. To see now it went from your grandmother to you. What is that transition? Are you thinking about cannabis as you're playing? Say, hey, this is like you're already kind of planting those seeds for when you leave and when you retire? Is that some of the process? Or?
No, heck no. Because 10 years ago, you got to think about 10 years ago, like it wasn't popular like it is now. Now it's popular. Everybody wants to jump out. Like, I sell weed, or I got a weed company. You know what I'm saying?
Put your name on it.
Everybody's so excited about it now. But 10 years ago when I did it, like it was still like, like people was not rolling. Being in Denver, I wish I would have started some of those conversations, but I was afraid. I just didn't know how everybody would perceive it. But I'm gonna tell you, for me, the time was like maybe a year and a half after I was done is when I realized like cannabis is definitely the thing of the future and everybody wants to talk about it. The reason why I say that is because I was in a transition of like not knowing if I wanted to go full cannabis or go full real estate. Or do both, right? So I was still taking real estate meetings with different groups and helping a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, raise money and stuff. And every time I would go to these meetings, and I'm in the meetings with guys worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and we'll go around, or they'll be like, "Al, what are you doing today? Like, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm here working with my friend Ethan, blah blah." But I also have a cannabis company. And once I said that, the real estate talk was off. All they wanted to talk about was cannabis. So that's when I realized, I'm like, I think this is where it's going, And then I actually spoke to, some of the people over in Denver at the Nuggets and different things like that. And, some people empowered there said to me, they said they would literally rather players, smoke a joint, go home, sit on the couch and play video games rather than be in a club, getting drunk, standing on the couch, no shirt, then driving home drunk that night, or potentially getting into a fight with somebody on the way out the club. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So hearing all that stuff just made me realize like this is really the next thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, that transitional period after let's talk about Viola now a little bit. So tell us a little bit about the company, right? Like what are some of the ethos? What is some of the things that you're thinking about that maybe makes your company a little bit different, or where your vision is as you're starting? Let's talk about when you're starting, like where you're getting the groundwork, because obviously the name has a deep meaning, which I assume just even talking to you a little bit before the cameras came on, and kind of seeing where your principles kind of lay just in the little bit of time we were talking. What was that foundation for getting it started, right? Like, what were some of the things you were thinking? I know health seems like a large part of the conversation, but also on the business side, it seems like you have like your work here in Detroit. You have a warehouse here that you're working on. You have companies, I think I heard you say about Missouri and some other spaces, which, I think even when we're thinking of cannabis, sometimes we just are hyper local. We're thinking about our little pocket. It seems like you have this spread of ideas for your company. So tell us
well, it's funny, like when you say that, right, it's, it's one of those things where like you do kind of have a hyper focus if you're going to be really successful, because there's so much opportunity. So you could kind of get distracted because there's so much stuff going on. But, at the end of the day, like our differentiator in the space is like that we're a black-owned cannabis company.
Right, which is huge.
It's, not even huge, but it's like, it's not a lot of us, period. You know what I'm saying? I think we represent less than, 2% of the industry. And I think as minorities as a whole, I think now it's probably up to 7%. You know what I'm saying? So we're in an industry where it's dominated by, obviously white males and different things like that. But with us being that we're black owned, we're entrenched in purpose. And our purpose is all about uplifting, educating, and empowering people of color, and using our platform as an opportunity to give them an opportunity to participate. When you think about the war on drugs, as we talked about earlier, it killed our community. You know what I'm saying? Like 85% of all drug arrests in the black community is cannabis related. And then when I think about, my other white counterparts, you know, when I used to do panels early in the game, like I was sitting on these panels with these guys and they'll sit and say how, you know, they sold so much weed in college that they got out of college debt free. They drove Corvettes and Ferraris and all that kind of stuff. And then in my neighborhood, the story is I got caught with a nickel bag 2-3 times and now I'm on a life sentence. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that, it's just like, that's totally messed up. And I think that, you know, we need to figure out how to have more equitable opportunities for people of color, people that was mostly infected. You know what I'm saying? So that's what Viola, that's what we use our platform for, is for the people. You know what I'm saying? On the product side and on the brand side, you know, we start off in Colorado. We have a 12,000 square foot facility there. We have a 40-acre farm in Oregon. Oh, wow. We have a 50,000 square foot building here in Detroit on the west side. You know, we're about to build out a 22,000 square foot facility in California. And then we have 80,000 square feet in Missouri and 100,000 square feet in Maryland. Oh, wow. You know what I'm saying? So we're building out all these cultivations, but, you know, as we build these things out, like I said, we're also trying to incubate or accelerate other brands of, like I said, of people of color, because there are, especially when you go into like communities like Detroit, right? You know, obviously we know this legacy program is about to take off, which is huge, right? But before you had that, right, you had, you know, companies that are on the black market that are thriving, right? But they're hiding. They can't get bank accounts. They can't buy homes, all these different things. And what I would like to do is try to figure out how I could do partnerships with them that we can bring them over to the legal side safely in a way that makes sense for them, you know what I'm saying? So that they can now participate in this industry that they, you know, they made sacrifices for too. You know what I'm saying? Like when you think about, you know, that there's so many people locked up behind it, now is this new $1 trillion potential industry, and you know, we're still locked out. You know what I mean? Like it's no real opportunity. So, you know, that's what we're just really focusing on. And, you know, obviously funding is a big part of it, but also just education. You know what I'm saying? Just understanding the industry, understanding the regulatory environment, because, you know, when I think about social equity, and everywhere is different, but, you know, a lot of times, you know, they're trying to do the right thing, but they're trying to give like someone that was recently incarcerated a license, right? So in theory, that sounds good, but at the end of the day, how does that person doesn't know how to run that license? So all you're gonna do is give them a license that they're gonna fail, and then they're gonna end up selling for pennies on the dollar. This is generational wealth at risk for our community. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like if we do this properly, then now we can start rebuilding our community from within, which is all we want. You know what I'm saying? We've always asked for reparations and different things like that, especially for all the things that we've done in this country. And it just seems like that'll never happen, right? So I think this is one of the ways that we can get some form of reparations, but it has to be done properly. And we have to make sure that the people that get the licenses, that they're educated and that they have a solid foundation so that they can really benefit from it. So like I said, not only can they benefit from it, them and their families, but then as they get set up, then now they can start trickling it down back to the community.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenging conversation, right? Like you think about, I mean, I've been in multiple conversations and meetings where you see like these white folks that are just open, right, about cannabis is their business. And just thinking about growing up, I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, which is about an hour and a half from here, very similar to Detroit in a lot of ways. And just thinking about people that have been in prison for cannabis, and now like they're sitting inside looking out like, man, now this is you know what I mean? Like it's making so much money that people are, you know, there's commercials, people putting stamps on, like billboards all over Detroit, right?
They should let them out already. Like, why are they still locked up? And not only when they let them out, they should expunge their records, because like in Colorado, if you're a felon, you can't work in the industry.
It's crazy, bro.
You know what I'm saying? And to me, and this is just being all the way honest, and this is where I try to encourage people, is that at the end of the day, like these big companies, these massive companies, like they're only 4 or 5 years old. Like you can't dominate an industry in that amount of time. So when I hear that, when you know that there is opportunity for us to really participate in, like, you know, and have a real significant portion, seat at the table, the whole thing. Right. But I feel like the untapped talent are those people. the people that were locked up for it.
Yeah,
Like,
because obviously they knew, you're right, they knew how to move product.
they know how to move it.
Yeah, of course.
They know how to market it.
Yeah,
they know how
of
to do
course.
it all. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So I really feel like they are the real untapped talent in the industry. So that's why, you know, once we let them out and different things like that, we also have to now give them an opportunity to participate in this industry that just destroyed their life.
Yeah, and I think that's like a huge contradiction. I think so like that just made me think about when you said like some of these brands are only 4 years old, right? If you think about like a cognac, how old some of those liquor brands are, right? I'm curious because it seems like to me your business acumen of anticipating the opportunity and the curve, you kind of were in a space where you were able to see these things and put them together and be like, this is something that I know is going to work in the future, so I need to invest in it. What is your thoughts on when the rest of, let's say, and we could just use sports leagues for an example, right? You can go to any sports, any game, whether it's NBA, NFL, any of them, and right, there's liquor brands everywhere.
Right.
Liquor sponsorships, it's a really regular thing, which you would think at some point, maybe it wouldn't be because like, well, you know, alcohol, sports, they don't mix, but obviously, right, it's like they have money, they want to support this, they want to get their product out to a fan base that will consume it. What do you feel, is there a trend? I've seen you have an interview with David Stern, the former commissioner for the NBA, which was amazing, and it seemed like he was very open. Not at the time that he was a commissioner, but you know, as a retired commissioner. What is your feeling about? Are you feeling the pulse of like where the business is going? Is there some level of, do we think like a brand like, let's say the NBA, at some point you might see some interaction with a cannabis brand? I'm not aware of it. Maybe I'm just ignorant of it. But do you feel like that is coming, or is that something that may happen, or is it when the federal kind of takes a shift and is like, all right, it's legal? What is your?
No, it's
your
coming
feeling?
sooner than you think. You know, I've been working with the MBPA with my CBD company. So it's called Harrington Wellness, and our first line of products is called Replay.
Okay.
So it's topicals and tinctures and capsules or whatever. So it's made by athletes for athletes. So we've been working with them. So I think there's some opportunity there that maybe some before the end of this season might pop off in regards to that. I think that to your point with like advertising, you know, I've talked to some of the NHL teams about advertising with Viola, different things like that. So it's coming. You know what I'm saying? And to your point, it's the same thing, right? You have to be 21 to consume liquor. You have to be 21 to smoke cannabis. It's the same exact thing. You know what I mean? And I always tell people sometimes too, I'm like, with parents, like, you know, just be a parent. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I have a 11, 9, 5, and 3-year-old, and they all understand what I do, why I do it. My 3-year-old, I always say he's the one that's gonna run Viola someday, because at 3 years old, like, he can smell weed and know the difference.
Yeah.
Like, he can smell like, that's OG daddy, that's Runt's daddy, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, it's just really just about just, you know, educating the kids around it. You know what I'm saying? I think that when you try to keep stuff away from people, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think when you can kind of normalize it and just have the conversations, I think that, you know, it sets it up for their potential transition to using cannabis or liquor or anything. You know what I'm saying? Makes it a lot easier. You know what I'm saying? If you can actually have the conversations. So, you know, I think that that's the main thing that leagues are worried about with advertisement. Everything comes back to the kids. Everything is like, how will kids perceive it? How will, not adults always, how are kids going to perceive it? And, you know, I think that it's just like anything else. You know, as a kid, liquor was readily available in my house, but I understood if I touched that bottle, I was going to get my behind whooped. You know what I'm saying? So it made me stay away from it, right? And I think it's the same thing with cannabis, man. We just got to, you know, educate our kids and be parents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about what are some of the things that you offer as Viola, and where can people kind of find, I mean, obviously your socials and that sort of thing, just to let people know like where we can connect with you.
Yeah, so I mean, our Instagram page is at Viola. And our Twitter. You can follow me at Al Harrington 3. Our website is violabrands.com. So that's pretty much all about social. I think we have a Facebook, but I'm not that.
I know how that goes.
I don't have a Facebook, so I'm not sure exactly what our Facebook is. But yeah, we're on most platforms. You know what I'm saying? We have a Triller page. We have a bunch of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for being with us. Al Harrington is going to be at Jars Detroit at 2:30 if you're watching.
Good luck.
You know what I mean? You can pull up, make sure you connect. You know, I just want to say on the perception of like, from the perspective of what We Are Culture Creators does, in particular working with young adults, it's really inspiring. One, that it's a Black-owned company. One of the things that our foundation is, what We Are Culture Creators, is folks of color leading initiatives in Detroit, creating opportunity out the mud, as we would say, right? And I think your story is one, obviously with the percentage of hearing like, you know, how many like Black-owned cannabis companies there are with that small percentage. One, it's inspiring, but it seems like you're going to be creating pathways for others. And I think that's one of the most important things. I think we lose sight in business. The old ways of doing things aren't necessarily going to be working in 2021. And it's really inspiring to see your work. So thank you, Jars. This is our first roundtable. If there's a place, you know, that we could clap, hopefully when COVID's up, we'll have a studio audience. But thank you so much for all your work and the things you're doing in the cannabis field. So
no problem, man. As you guys build out your, you know, you guys' initiatives, definitely reach out to us because we're always looking for, you know, talent. You know, so any way we can help and partner and, you know, do any type of, you know, events and stuff together, definitely reach out to us. We'd love to help and be a part of it.
Sounds great. Thank you.